Hello, welcome back to Jorbs Scribbles on the Screen. It talks about every single thing in the Slay the Spire compendium. Slowly going a little bit insane, but I gotta say the uncommons are more interesting to talk about than the commons at least. Talking about Burning Pact today. Burning Pact costs 1. It exhausts 1 card and draws 2 cards, upgrading to draw 3 cards. And the first thing I have to say about Burning Pact is, ooh, yeah. This is generally a card that I would love to want to put into one of my decks. It is nice to have a deck where it's worth 1 energy to draw 2 or 3 cards. And I think I've talked a lot about the value of exhausting 1 card as well already. I talked about a lot when reviewing True Grit, so if you missed that, maybe watch the True Grit video. But exhausting 1 card, especially coupled with card draw, is very strong too for boss fights. You can exhaust down to a set of, 5 cards of whatever you choose, which could go infinite or could give you tons of block and damage or could scale your strength very fast or whatever. Just depends what cards you have, but being able to exhaust a card and draw cards accelerates that rapidly, and being able to draw more cards is hopefully good for you in hallway fights and elite fights as well. That said, you want to start taking this as soon as you can, but you probably don't want to be taking it on floor 1 of a run. Not only is exhausting 1 card not that great on floor 1 of the run because you don't have anything in place to exhaust down to yet, but also drawing 2 cards doesn't really do anything when all you're doing is drawing strikes and defends for the most part. And this card doesn't have any immediate output, by which I mean it doesn't deal any damage straight away, and it doesn't block at all straight away either. So if you're fighting against Gremlin Knob, this is not the card that you want. If you're fighting against Lagavulin, this is almost certainly not the card that you want either. If you're fighting against Sentries, probably not the card that you want. Card draw starts to get really good once you have cards in your deck that are worth drawing. So you start off with 10 bad cards, pretty much all bad cards, I think it's fair to say. Bash can do okay when upgraded. Defends might get good later in the run, but for the most part, you have 10 bad cards at the start of a run. Now, if you were to add an Immolate Plus to your deck, just like somehow the first card you added was an Immolate Plus, Burning Pact might already be worth putting in your deck. Because if you can just draw toward an Immolate Plus instead of spending 1 of your energy on playing a strike, you're actually going to end up dealing more damage on average. That's like iffy, but hopefully you see my point, where as you get more and more of these really strong cards, card draw goes up and up in value. And as you get cards which are strong in certain situations but aren't strong in other situations, card draw similarly goes up in value. Say you have an Immolate in your deck, well, that's good against Slavers, cool. So you want to be able to draw that against Slavers. Now if you added Disarm Plus to your deck as well, that card's very good against Book of Stabbing. And so now you have 1 card that you really want to draw against Book of Stabbing, 1 card that you really want to draw against Slavers, and all of a sudden, all of your cards like Burning Pact and Battle Trance have just gotten much, much, much better because of their ability to get those cards that you need as soon as possible in those fights. So, in general, card draw gets better later on in the run. In general, exhausting cards gets better around about the end of Act 2, I would say. I think it's quite common to care about exhausting down to a certain set of cards in the Act 2 boss fight. Not always the case, but somewhat common. And so that's generally where I'm looking at Burning Pact starting to be a strong card. There are some runs where it never becomes that great. The reason that Burning Pact might not become an incredible card might be that I actually took a Pandora's box early, and so I sort of don't have any bad cards in my deck. All of my cards are just sort of ubiquitously good, but I'm sort of short on energy. In a situation like that, it's not super important to be adding a card that costs 1 energy that draws cards for you, because hopefully you just always have a good hand every single turn anyway. and you don't have enough energy to be spending on drawing more cards regardless. But in general, the second half of Act 2 or so, Burning Pact tends to become somewhat exciting, and it can't even be taken earlier than that, I think. It's one of those things where you expect this to be strong in the late game, and so if you feel like you're particularly ahead in the early game, you can start taking it even though it's not that good yet. Another thing to mention is that this card does sometimes run into trouble where you don't want to play it because if you draw a corruption, you won't have enough energy left to play the corruption. It can run into trouble with Battle Trance. If you play Battle Trance and draw a Burning Pact off it, you can't draw more cards with a Burning Pact, unfortunately, that turn. So there are a few situations where it can be awkward to play. But in general, this is a really nice resource to have. You're very commonly going to find good use for it. It's going to open up some opportunities for you that you wouldn't have at all without a card like it. For example, exhausting down to a Dropkick Infinite against the champ at the end of Act 2. And so taking at least one of these is going to very often be correct, and taking multiples of them is sometimes going to be correct as well. Yeah. I think it's hard for anybody to say what the theoretical right percentage of the time someone should be winning with strength versus exhaust versus exhausting down to infinites versus just playing really high value cards is for Ironclad. And so I'm not trying to tell you that you should always win a certain way, or that most of the time you should win a certain way. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say this is really strong in this strategy, which can win the game. So if you find yourself in a situation where it looks like that's the closest thing to you, that's the thing that's easiest to move toward, and you find this card, you should probably be taking this card. Or if you're the sort of player who really enjoys playing the sort of strategy where you exhaust a lot of cards in your deck or draw really powerful cards that you've added to your deck, this card could make sense for you. But there are going to be other strategies where Burning Pact's not quite as strong. Strategies built around putting out a lot of front-loaded output. In general, I'd say this is a really strong card, but don't force it into your deck if it doesn't fit. And yeah, just keep an eye on when it does. Alright, thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and I'll see you next time.